There is a sound that should never exist among the cheerful clinking of glasses. It is the silence of someone trying to swallow but unable to. I heard it clearly when my grandmother raised her glass to toast my brother's engagement. The sound of wine being poured into crystal glasses, the laughter of aunts and uncles, and the razor-thin space between me and the name engraved on the glass in front of me. Jason. My name is Jordan. No one corrected it. No one even looked. Maybe they forgot. Or maybe they never really remembered. I reached out and gently turned the glass, seeing Jason etched in soft golden letters like a harmless joke, as if I was never important enough for them to get it right. The dining room was designed in a classic style, high-ceiling chandelier electric fireplace. The walls were lined with family photos from the 1980s, all white faces, and me, I was the only shadow with this skin tone in that entire house. Standing among them, I felt like an exclamation mark misplaced in a story that was never written for me. My brother walked in, gray suit, a watch on his wrist worth the tuition of a child's college education. Everyone gasped as if they had just seen the embodiment of the American dream. My mother said, "You make me proud," then glanced at me, like she was checking whether I had learned how to smile when no one says my name. I lowered my head, smiled, and stayed silent. The dinner started with toasts and carried on with comparisons. Who just bought a house, who got promoted, who was promising to do something big. And me, I just sat there with the glass engraved with the wrong name untouched. No one noticed, or maybe they pretended not to, that for the first 17 minutes of the party, I had not taken a single sip. Not because I was not thirsty, but because I was waiting for something more important, a look that said I was actually seen. But the only thing I saw was their backs turned away. Since I was very young, I had grown used to living in the shadow of a brother who always shone with brilliance. Not because I did not try. I studied, stayed up late, kept telling myself I had to achieve something. But it seemed like everything I did, whether small or big, was always compared. And in every one of those comparisons, I was always the one who fell short. My brother studied economics, a major that every adult in the family praised as a solid future. He got into a prestigious university, graduated on time, landed a job right after, and with his very first paycheck, he bought a high-end phone. Before I even knew how to ride a motorbike, he already had his own car. And me, I just loved computers. I loved designing interfaces, figuring out programming on my own, writing lines of code, hundreds of characters long that no one in the house understood. Which is why, in their eyes, everything I was doing was meaningless. Every time I excitedly shared a newly finished design or a feature I had built myself, I was usually met with doubtful looks, a tired sigh from my mom, or worse, the familiar repeated comments, "Why not study economics like your brother? Drawing and tech stuff like that? What kind of job will that get you in the future? What kind of young man just stays holed up in his room, not talking to anyone, not making a single dime?" At first I wanted to explain, but the more I talked, the less they understood. Everything I said sounded like a foreign language, one no one in the family wanted to learn, let alone listen to. So I learned how to stay quiet, nod, lower my head, go back to my room, and shut the door. But the door was never thick enough to block out the echoes. From dinner conversations, from chats between my parents and relatives, between my brother and the whole family. I heard it all, and I got used to feeling like the extra piece in the very home I lived in. My family was not cruel. They did not yell. They were never violent. But it was that very softness that exhausted me the most. The kind of words that seemed harmless, but when repeated every single day became like drops of water falling on the same spot. One day it would not just soak through, it would dig deep. Every family meal was a stage. My brother was always the center, He would talk about big clients, about current projects, about the investment market. My mom would pile more food on his plate. My dad would nod proudly, then punctuate it with his usual catchphrase, "So proud of him." And me, I sat at the edge of the table, picking at my vegetables, eyes down. No one asked me how I was doing. No one asked what I was up to. I existed like background detail, not meant to stand out, not allowed to speak up, and if I disappeared, probably no one would notice. No one asked for my thoughts. No one wanted my input, and no one in the family ever looked long enough to see that I was trying. No one asked what I was working on, what I liked, or even just how I was living. I was present at every dinner, every family conversation, yet I always felt like I was on the other side of thick glass, seeing everything, hearing everything, but never really touched by it. The silence between me and them did not come from a fight or from some dramatic rift. It came from the most ordinary days, the moments when I almost spoke up, but stopped knowing no one truly wanted to listen. I started staying up late, not because I could not sleep, but because only at night would the world finally go quiet enough for me to feel alive. In the steady hum of the fan and the soft glow of my computer screen, I taught myself to code. No teacher, no classes, no one beside me, just me and endless English documents, tangled lines of code like mazes and brand new concepts I had to look up word by word. I learned how to build websites, design apps, call APIs, run test servers, analyze user behavior using tools I had only just discovered that morning. I was not good at it. I messed up simple lines of code more times than I could count. But I was patient, because I knew if I was not patient with myself, no one else would be. One time I redesigned the interface of a small app for a friend. I tweaked every detail, adjusted every font, handpicked every color, reworked the whole flow, just because one transition felt a little off. When I sent over the final version, he replied, "If we could sell this, it might actually make some decent money." I felt happy the entire afternoon, not because of the money, but because someone, even just one person, saw value in what I had made. That night I told my mom while she was cooking. I thought, maybe this time would be different. But she simply said in her usual soft tone, "Stop dreaming. That kind of thing cannot feed you." My dad was reading the newspaper. He did not even look up, just folded the page and said, like ending the conversation completely, "This generation, all about big dreams. Not realistic, like your brother." I stayed quiet, not because I agreed, but because I knew if I said anything more, I would be seen as disrespectful. And in this house, someone who is nothing does not get to talk back to someone who is successful. I went back to my room. I did not cry. I was not angry. But that night, for the first time, I did not open my laptop. I just sat there watching the screen's light reflecting off the white wall, stuck on that sentence, "Not realistic, like your brother." I had heard it for years, but it had never felt this heavy. It pressed on me like something without a name, without a shape or form, but strong enough to make me not want to prove myself anymore. The last time I tried to share something was when I was 24. That dinner was unusually crowded. Everyone was in their usual spots, Dad at the head of the table, Mom to his right, my brother near the window, and me, as always, at the far end, where all it took was a slight tilt of my head to avoid eye contact with anyone. I do not know why my heart was beating so fast. Maybe because that night I had decided to finally speak up about something I had kept to myself. Something I had been preparing for an entire week, writing it down, erasing it, writing it again. I wanted to try building a startup. I had this idea for an app that used artificial intelligence to help unemployed people rewrite their resumes. I had already built a basic prototype. A friend who works in human resources had looked it over and said that with more work it could really be useful. I believed in it. I wanted to keep going. I took a deep breath, set my chopsticks down, looked up, and started to speak. My voice was not loud, not overly confident, but it was clear. I talked about the idea, about the potential, about how I had stayed up for weeks learning recommendation algorithms, designing interfaces, testing the user experience. I had barely gotten through half of it when my mom sighed quietly, not loud, but loud enough to sink the entire table into silence. Another one who wants to be a boss. That one sentence, like a thin blade, sliced through all the energy and hope that had just started to burn inside me. I turned to my dad, hoping he would say something different. But he just lifted his tea, shook his head, and with eyes fixed on the distance, said, as if I had told him a worn-out story, startups. So many people throw in millions and still fail. You should be more realistic. Before I could reply, my brother chuckled. Not loudly, but just enough to make me feel small. It was not a mocking laugh, and it was not supportive either. It was that kind of laugh that felt halfway between pity and silently thinking, what silly idea is this now? No one asked me anything else. No one said, tell me more, let me see it, or even just, that sounds interesting. My story was swallowed up instantly by the next topic, the new car my brother had just placed a deposit on. Mom asked what color. Dad asked if the seats were leather. My brother excitedly talked about its acceleration, the hybrid engine, the luxury showroom with its own coffee bar in the waiting area. I sat there, my hands clenched tightly under the table. The chill in my fingertips slowly spread up my arms, then into my throat. I lowered my head, eyes staring at the bowl of rice that had long since gone cold. I did not say another word, and from that moment I taught myself never to share anything again. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I realized in this house my words had never been strong enough to be held on to. Since that day, I still wake up on time every morning, still make coffee using the little filter my mom bought last year, still open my laptop, work quietly, still write code, fix bugs, revise, logic, study new frameworks. But I do not talk about it anymore. I do not show off. I no longer try to be acknowledged. I just work, alone, quietly, consistently. At night, the yellow light from my room spills out through the small window, flickering gently on the neighbor's rooftop tiles, swaying with the wind like a lone lantern, trying to stay lit in a house that never needed its light. My room has become its own little world, a place where I am free to fail, free to dream, and free to fall apart without being judged. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of the family photo hanging in the living room, the one from my brother's graduation. I am in it too. Standing off to the left, my face blurred by glare eyes, looking away, out of focus. But just visible enough, not to be cropped out of the frame. Just enough for someone to say, the youngest is in the photo too. I look at that picture and suddenly realize maybe that is how I exist in this family. Faded, blurry, and just barely enough to not be completely forgotten. I smile, not out of happiness, not from pain, just a bitter kind of smile, like I had finally understood my role in that photograph. I was there, but no one looked at me. I existed, but I was never the center. And maybe that is how I grew up, as the quiet shadow of someone else's brighter light. My brother kept succeeding. Every month brought something new, a bigger office, a newer car, invitations to speak at business conferences. His girlfriend, beautiful, sharp. A well-known investment director started appearing in my parents' stories like a brand new badge of honor waiting to be displayed. The wedding is coming up. They said it would be the event of the year in our extended family. My parents talked about venues, about the dowry, about dresses, about the wedding photos. And me, I am still here, upstairs in the old house. Same corner, same wooden desk, same screen glowing pale blue. I write code through the night, endless lines, bugs that keep me up till morning. No one knows what I am doing. No one asks if I am hungry or tired, and I have gotten used to it. I have never stepped into an office job, never had a nameplate on a meeting table, never once got introduced at family gatherings as the youngest one, and he's doing great too. I have never heard praise from my dad, not even a vague compliment. But I have never stopped, because I know if I stop trying, I will disappear. Not die, but crumble into invisible air in this house, and no one will even notice that I ever existed. I am not afraid of being poor. You can always start over. What I am afraid of is going my whole life without leaving anything behind for myself. An idea, a product, a line of code that I know without a doubt was made by my own hands. A trace that proves I was here on my own terms, not borrowing anyone else's light. I do not need applause. I do not need a party or some proud introduction. I just want for once to be heard like a real person. No comparisons. No being ignored. No being treated like the shadow forever standing outside the family story. But that never happened. And maybe it never will not in this house. I left home on a morning before the sun had fully risen. No one called my name. No sound of dishes clinking in the kitchen. No lights turned on to see me off. Just the soft thud of my rubber sandals on the familiar staircase tiles, the same ones from back when I was in 3rd grade, now chipped in places. I walked down slowly, as if afraid of waking something that had been asleep too long. But deep down, I knew, even if I broke a glass in the kitchen, no one would wake up to ask, "What happened, son?" I did not take much with me. No rolling suitcase, no fancy backpack. Just an old, faded one, stuffed with a few changes of clothes, a worn-out laptop, and a thick notebook filled cover to cover with writing ideas, diagrams, early sketches of something I had never dared to name. It was not grand. It was not a billion-dollar dream. But it was the only thing I had left after years of being seen as someone who did not matter. I stood in front of my bedroom door for a long while, key in hand, my heart quiet like a blank sheet of paper. I was not sad. I was not angry. What I felt most clearly was emptiness, like I had never truly been part of this place. I placed the key on the shoe rack, the same spot my mom used to leave hers whenever I came home late from school. The rack was old now, and the scent of damp wood lightly hung in the humid morning air. I looked around one last time. The photos on the walls, the worn-out sofa, the dusty bookshelf. Everything was still just as it always had been. But one thing was different. This time I was leaving, not because I was angry, but because I understood if I did not walk away now, I would spend the rest of my life in that room, coding building apps, fixing bugs, staring down the hallway, waiting for someone to ask me a question. And that had never happened. I stepped out of the house as quietly as a shadow. No goodbyes, no take care or call us often. No father standing by the door with watchful eyes. No mother slipping extra food into my bag. No one looked back. And no one knew. I would not be coming back. No tears fell, but something inside me shattered, silently, without a sound, like a speck of dust in a childhood bedroom drifting away from the place it once called home. I did not know what the future held, but I knew I could not stay one day longer. Because if I did, I would disappear completely like a shadow drowned in someone else's spotlight, unable to leave even a faint trace on the wall. The first room I rented was at the end of a small alleyway in a damp row of one-story houses. Rain seeped through the walls, the smell of mildew mixed with morning incense from next door. It was exactly 129 square feet, or about 12 square meters. Paint peeled off the walls. A water stain on the ceiling shaped like a giant hand. The window only opened halfway and the aluminum frame was rusted. Whenever the wind blew, the window rattled with a soft creak, like someone moaning in the dark. All I had was an old mattress on the cold tile floor, a wobbly wooden desk with one broken leg propped up by 3 layers of newspaper, and a dim ceiling bulb that flickered like the heartbeat of someone hesitating between hope and giving up. Cockroaches skittered in the corners. Rats ran across the metal roof. A couple next door argued over late rent payments. Together, they made the soundtrack to the nights I sat alone in front of my laptop. I set the computer on the desk, opened my notebook, and plugged it in. I pulled out a packet of instant noodles, poured hot water into a chipped plastic cup. I did not eat right away. I waited for the noodles to soften, then sat down and typed the first line of code, not just to start a project, but to begin a journey. No one knew I had left home. No one messaged, "Where are you?" or "Do you need money?" I did not tell anyone, because I knew even if I did, no one would truly listen. I started out by taking on small freelance gigs through obscure online forums. One day I was designing a banner for an online cosmetics shop. Another day someone hired me to write a few lines of code for a mobile phone store's website. Once I worked on user experience design for an English learning app aimed at seniors. Each project only paid a few $100,000 Vietnamese, which is roughly just a few dollars. Some clients ghosted me. Others made me redo everything for an entire week before paying up. I accepted it all, not because I was easygoing, but because I needed to survive. I needed food. I needed to pay rent. I needed to keep breathing just long enough to protect the only thing I truly believed in, even if no one else cared. It was an idea I had never told anyone, building an artificial intelligence platform for small and medium businesses where production data would no longer be trapped in old Excel files, but organized, learned from, and optimized automatically so that every machine, every worker, every operation could adapt like a living neural network. I called it Novaris. From nova, a supernova, something that explodes in the dark, becoming the brightest light in the universe. No one paid for that idea. No compliments, no sponsors. No one asked, "What are you working on?" Just me, a flickering screen in a 12 square meter room, and a dream no one had ever recognized. I wrote at night, after all the freelance work was done. After my inbox stayed silent with no new offers. After my stomach stayed empty, even after 2 packs of instant noodles. The city outside went quiet with only the sound of rain or a late-night truck passing by. And I kept typing as if carving a tunnel through the darkness, hoping that someday a light would appear at the end. I did not have a digital drawing pad. I used a pencil to sketch data flows on the chipped plaster wall. I did not own a nice whiteboard, just an old plastic sheet covered in marker stains, where I wrote down every algorithm, every repeating function, every broken logic flow I had to fix again and again. I stuck paper notes on the window on the cabinet, even on my laptop lid, reminders that there was still work to do, still bugs to fix, still hope to hold on to. Some nights were so cold that I had to code under a blanket. The screen propped in front of me, my arms stretching out from the warmth to reach the keyboard. Some nights I was so exhausted I passed out at the desk, fingers still resting on the enter key, as if pressing it would suddenly make everything work. But nothing happened. Just another red error line on the black screen. I told no one. I did not post online. I did not ask for feedback or shares. Because I knew if it is not finished, if it has not created real value yet, then anything I say is just noise. I once had exactly 18,000 Vietnamese dong left in my account, less than $1. I once turned off the electric stove because I could not afford gas. One day I drank unboiled tap water and had a stomachache the whole afternoon, but still had to work because the deadline was close. I once spent 3 days debugging a single piece of code because there was no one to review it. I once cried by myself after finishing my first analytics module, not out of joy, but because after all that effort, still no one saw it. No one said, "Good job." No one said, "Keep going." thought about quitting, but then I remembered I had come too far to turn back. On the wall, I taped a small scrap of paper with cheap tape. In messy ballpoint pen, it read, "If the world has no place for you, build your own door." I wrote code. I wrote documents. I wrote proposals. I sent demos everywhere, startup competitions, tech blogs, private forums. Most never replied. A few responded just to politely decline. But I kept going, because I believed if I stopped now, all those cold, rainy nights would have been for nothing. One night, heavy rain poured down, and the roof leaked the water landing right where I slept. I curled up in a corner, hugging my laptop hands, trembling not just from the cold, but from a fear I could not name, afraid all my effort was going the wrong way. Afraid tomorrow would come and nothing would change. Afraid I really would become exactly what they had said, just a dreamer. I thought about that dinner table where I sat in the corner picking vegetables, and every conversation revolved around my brother. I thought about the family photo where I stood off to the side, my face unclear, and I whispered, "It's okay, I'll go my own way." One night while fixing the inventory analysis module, I played a soft jazz playlist in the background. The screen's light reflected on my face, tired, worn out, but focused. I typed each line like carving words into stone, slow, steady, and quiet. No one interrupted with a smirk. No one asked, "So what is this even for?" No one sat across from me at the dinner table staring past me like I was invisible. In that small, worn-out 12-square-meter room, for the first time I felt like I truly existed. I have not succeeded yet, but I know one thing for sure: at the very least, I have not lived a meaningless life. I lived in the dark for over a year. No recognition, no title, no acknowledgement. Not a single word of encouragement. No eyes looking at me directly. Not one real voice calling my name. Only words that passed by like I was the wind. Just the steady sound of typing each night. Just the glow of the screen and the soft hum of an old desk fan. Just one will, quiet, voiceless, but never extinguished. I sent my first demo overseas through an email no one would recognize, under a name no one knew. Username Ray. Phone number registered through a VoIP app. Communication interface Slack, only showing an abstract profile picture, no face. I did not use my real name. Not because I was afraid of being found out, but because I was not ready to be judged again. That name, my real name, had carried too many interruptions. Too many half smiles full of pity. Too many comments like I have no idea what that kid is even trying to do. I wanted Ray to be a shadow, a shell, a mask, just enough to hide the cracks inside me, and just enough for people to see what I was building instead of seeing me, the one they had long dismissed as useless. And then the first development team started to form. They did not ask how old I was. They did not ask what school I went to, where I lived, or what jobs I had done. They only asked, "Does this processing logic work yet?" And I answered with action, with smooth-running code, with clean, bug-free logs. We had never seen each other's faces, not once. Every exchange happened in text, but there was a quiet, powerful connection between us, like climbers in the night relying only on the rope tied to their waists. I wrote the technical documentation. They optimized the processing speed. I redesigned the data flow system. They implemented inventory analysis algorithms. No compliments, no empty encouragement, just the work. It runs or it does not. It is good or it is not. And slowly within our internal Slack, the name Ray started to come up more and more. Send this to Ray for review. Ray says that part is still slow. Ray pushed the fix at 3 o'clock in the morning. No one knew Ray's face, but they knew this Ray laid the first brick. Ray worked before he spoke. Ray fixed bugs on Christmas Eve without being asked. Ray sent in a flawless prototype. No fanfare, just precision. I did not need anyone to know who I was. I did not need a fancy title. I did not need a polished LinkedIn profile. All I needed was for the system to work and to be respected, not for my name, but for the real value I created. When a partner company in Europe expressed interest in testing the initial version, I still let someone else be the legal face. Still just Ray in the system. I stayed behind the scenes, coordinated, took on the role of technical lead, held shares but never revealed my identity. Not because I was afraid. I just was not ready to take off the mask yet. I needed to let the product speak first, and if one day it was strong enough, big enough, then I would let my real name appear, because I knew if I showed my face too early, the first thing people would remember would not be the product, but the guy who got laughed at over dinner years ago. I still lived in that small room. Every night while the team slept, I would be up reviewing documentation, adding another example, fixing a bug, updating the user guide. And just before laying down on my thin mattress, I would whisper to myself, Ray is not me, but Ray is the person I am trying to become. A version that does not fear judgment, does not crave praise, just wants to be true to himself. And if one day the light is bright enough, I will step out with my real name, as my true self. But the light did not come as I imagined. It was not the spotlight. It was not the gentle glow of a promising morning. It came as a short, blunt text message, cold as a command, your brother's getting engaged. Be there. No greeting, no exclamation point, not a trace of warmth or longing. Just a summoning like I was an employee being called to a meeting. Nothing more. I stared at that message in the dim light of my old phone screen. Not angry, not pleased. I did not feel a reason to react at all, but something in my chest tightened. A cold draft brushing through old scars I thought had already healed. I sat like that all night, not sleeping, not working. Just staring into the dark, hearing the ghost of keyboard clicks in my head. Then I folded my cleanest shirt, packed it with a small bottle of water and a broken-toothed comb into my backpack. I shut down the computer. For the first time in a long while, I left the room without knowing when I would come back. That house, where I had once grown up, once quietly left behind, had barely changed. But the air inside was different. It no longer smelled of bland soup or hummed with the old ceiling fan. Now it shimmered with chandelier light, velvet-rented sofas, rows of pastel-colored wedding flowers arranged like a ballroom in a five-star hotel. Scented candles' perfume and the clink of wine glasses drifted from the living room where the whole extended family had gathered in, full dressed up and buzzing like a victory party. I stood in the hallway, my shadow stretched across the glossy tile floor. No one turned around. No one noticed I was there. I touched the doorframe, took a deep breath, and stepped in. Softly, quickly like a shadow slipping through. I did not want to disturb anything. I did not want to make anyone uncomfortable. I just looked for a seat. A long table was set up in the center of the room, decorated with ribbons and scented candles. Nearly every seat was taken, except for one, near the far end next to a potted plant. I sat there. No one asked where I had come from, what I was doing these days, or where I lived. A distant relative nodded politely, then turned right back to a conversation about the booming real estate market. Someone talked about a plot of land tripling in value over 2 years. Another showed off a brand new car still carrying that fresh leather smell. I just sat there, a glass of water in my hands, growing colder with time. I did not know where to rest my eyes, so I let them settle across the table, where all the light seemed to gather on one person, my brother. He stepped out from behind the crowd in a crisp white shirt, hair slicked neatly, holding a glass of champagne, face glowing like the lead in a romantic wedding movie. Beside him was his fiancée, a tall, poised woman with intelligent eyes and calm confidence. She did not need to speak. Everyone instinctively looked her way. Applause broke out like a wave crashing on shore. The elders said they were a perfect match. The younger folks scrambled to take photos. No one noticed me. The one sitting at the edge of the table holding a water glass in both hands, like a child waiting for their turn to speak. I stayed silent, not because I was sad, but because I was used to it. Used to being in the frame, but never truly seen. Used to existing without being acknowledged. I sat there like an uninvited guest, no ticket at the door, but allowed to stay, because I was family. All the eyes were on my brother. All the praise, the congratulations, the talk of the future, all circled around him. I watched him laugh, shake hands, throw his arm around shoulders. There was no space left for me in that dazzling room. But I was not bitter anymore, because this time I had not come to be recognized. I had come just to quietly witness. He stepped to the center of the table, raised his glass with a confidence so natural it felt rehearsed. His voice rang out clear beneath the sparkling lights. Thank you everyone for being here. Today is a happy day for me, and also a time for the family to come together and talk about big things. Everyone responded immediately. Clinks of glasses, laughter rising like fireworks after a cue. I raised my glass too, but did not drink, because deep down I knew. I had never been part of those big things. I was just someone sitting at the edge, raising my glass where no one truly saw it. A shadow that did not change the composition. After a few rounds of toasts, a few stories about new houses, new cars, stocks, and gold prices, my brother suddenly turned, as if someone had whispered, "Hey, that guy's here too." He looked at me, his smile a little tilted, voice somewhere between a suggestion and a favor. "Hey, why don't you just come work at my company? Even just something small in marketing. I'll put in a word." His words echoed through the rising excitement like a small stone dropped into a party, subtle but sending ripples. I looked up, not yet able to answer, and he had already turned back to the others, laughing like he had just told a casual joke. "But this guy's proud, you know. Probably still trying to be a founder somewhere." That line hit like a pebble tossed into a still pond, small but cutting. A few quiet laughs followed. Not loud, not long, but just enough to shift the mood. Enough to sting the skin of someone long used to enduring. I looked down at my glass, my hand trembling slightly. No one spoke up. No one changed the subject. No one tried to smooth it over with a laugh. And that silence after the joke, that was what hurt the most. As if everyone quietly agreed that I deserved the jab. That my presence there really was strange. The conversation quickly veered back to real estate. Someone mentioned a project in a new district. Someone else brought up an upcoming IPO. I sat there still listening, but inside I was drifting. Every new topic crashing over me like a wave washing away any will to speak. It was not because I was hurt. It was because for the first time I realized there are some dinner tables where my silence is the only thing of value I can offer. The faint clink of my spoon against the glass rang through the still air like a pin dropping on cold stone. A sound so small no one noticed, but in my head it echoed like a warning bell that something was about to happen. I remained seated in the forgotten corner of the table next to the decorative plant placed there to fill the invisible gap surrounded by stories of success and investment opportunities that were never meant for me. The glass of water in my hand had long lost its chill, but I held on to it tightly as if trying to anchor myself to reality in the swirling absurdity of this celebration. As if letting go would mean vanishing from the room, from the memory of those who once called me family. After my brother's veiled joke, after a few raised eyebrows and polite chuckles from distant relatives, everything quickly returned to its usual pattern. I was brushed past again, No one checked in. No one looked back. No one cared whether I was still sitting there or had slipped out. I was like a blurry background element photoshopped into the family picture. Present or absent, it made no difference to the overall composition. I bowed my head, took a deep breath, and reached to push my chair back. I thought about leaving quietly, just like I had left this house a year ago. No farewells, no one noticing, no one minding. But just as my foot brushed the floor, a voice spoke up. Not loud, not rushed, but clear enough that every other sound seemed to stop to make room for it. Novaris. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. I instinctively turned toward the voice, even though I had not yet grasped why those two syllables sent a chill down my spine. That voice was unfamiliar, not wrapped in the usual cold indifference of family gatherings, nor sugar-coated with passive-aggressive tones. It was a different tone altogether, soft calm, but sharp in every breath. It was her voice, my brother's fiancée, the woman who had been polite and composed the entire evening, who had nodded and smiled, but never once joined a conversation. And now her eyes were on me, unblinking, steady. She was not looking at me like a person. She was scanning me. Like a memory she was trying to match, like a question that had just slipped into clarity. I sat back down. She kept looking. That gaze held no hesitation, no effort to hide the growing realization. I knew that look, the look of someone on the edge of discovering something significant. And in that moment, it felt like the entire room had folded in on the two of us. One who had just said the word Novaris, and the other who had lived in the shadows for years now, trembling not from fear, but from knowing something irreversible was drawing near. She pulled out her phone. Her fingers glided across the screen with deliberate care, like someone digging through a sea of data for a specific piece of memory. The room buzzed with conversation, but her voice, though soft, reached every corner like a ripple in glass. No one needed prompting. Somehow the noise around us just drained away. Novaris, the AI-based supply chain management system my firm has been tracking. She said, eyes still fixed on the screen, now displaying charts, figures, and growth curves sharp enough to cut through the heavy air in the dining room. I've reviewed every update, every log, every patch, every security upgrade. I've been following that project closely for nearly a year. Her voice was not raised, but there was something about her tone that compressed the air around us, as if everyone all at once stopped chewing, stopped breathing, stopped existing. No chopsticks lifted, no whisper broke the silence. She looked up. Her gaze shifted from the screen to my brother, the man who had only recently held her hand, the same man who had joked that I should take a junior marketing job. The CEO listed on all official documents is Ray Mitchell. She paused. Ray Mitchell. And then something clicked. She turned back to me, but now her eyes no longer held polite curiosity. They held disbelief, not the kind that denies, but the kind that knows and cannot ignore. Wait, Ray Mitchell is you. It was not a question. It was a blow to the heart of reality. It landed silently but stirred everything from the bottom up, like a stone tossed into still water. I did not rush to speak, did not deny, did not nod or shake my head. I just looked at her, with the same gaze I had given my debugging screen every night for the past year, calm, patient, needing no confirmation. 2 seconds passed. No one moved. Then I gave a small nod. Instantly, the atmosphere froze. Someone dropped a napkin onto the floor. A relative paused, mid-toast hand suspended in the air. A younger cousin stared at me like I was some hidden identity from an international manhunt. My mother froze, lips moving, but no words coming out. My father did not look at me. He looked at her holding her phone like it had just revealed a truth bigger than this entire family. No way, my brother muttered. His voice shook with disbelief. Ray Mitchell? Is him? She did not answer him. She looked at me, then back at him. Then she nodded. Her eyes no longer showed admiration for a future husband, only certainty, sharp and undeniable. The kind of certainty only an investor has when they discover the founder behind a startup that made it through a Series A round without ever showing their face. I thought Ray Mitchell was a foreigner, she said. I even searched LinkedIn, dug through GitHub. Nothing. No photo, no background. I figured he must be some senior engineer who left a big tech company. I never imagined. It was you. The room did not break apart with sound. It cracked quietly the way old bricks finally split after years of absorbing water. Nothing dramatic. But something had shifted forever. I was still seated at the end of the table. Same old shirt, dusty shoes, no badge, no introduction, no speech. But my eyes, they no longer held the fear of questions like, "What are you doing these days?" They held something else now. The quiet knowing of someone who has finally claimed his place. She set her phone down like it had just burned her hand. Her face, usually calm, the face of a seasoned investor, was now bare stunned, almost confused. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I've read the full internal reports, real-time data processing, autonomous inventory analysis, demand forecasting, cost optimization across the whole supply chain. My team compared it to SAP's pilot last quarter, and Novartis outperformed it by nearly 18% in inventory accuracy." Her voice was still soft, but every word sliced through the crowd like a blade. Everyone stopped. They did not understand her words. All they heard were fragments: SAP data analytics, supply chain, and Novartis. But I understood, clearly, because I was the one who rewrote the inventory module 4 times. I was the one who argued with overseas teammates just to change a single request structure. My father looked from her to me, eyes full of confusion. What is this thing?" he asked, his voice. Not angry, not even skeptical, just lost, like trying to hold on to a piece of logic that no longer worked. My brother frowned, lines forming deep across his forehead. "You're saying he built that platform?" "No way." His voice came out like a reflex without thought. She nodded, no longer hesitating. "The name on every document is Ray Mitchell. But I know. The one who built it from scratch, who wrote the core architecture, who patched the first server attack in the early weeks, is Ray. And Ray," she turned and pointed, "is him." No one spoke. I sat up straighter, not out of pride, just because for the first time during this entire gathering, I did not have to lower my gaze to avoid pity. I was still me, same shirt, same shoes, same seat at the end of the table. But suddenly, the whole room turned to me. No interruptions, no mocking. No one dared to say he talks a lot, but does nothing. Because this time, the truth did not come from my mouth. It came from someone outside this family. Someone with no reason to lie for me, no obligation to take my side. And that made her words impossible to dismiss. My brother turned to me, his face frozen. I could see it in his eyes, the chaos of memories rearranging themselves. The nights I skipped dinner, the months I missed every family event. The name Ray he might have overheard during some board meeting, now forming into shape. She was still looking at me, not accusing, not doubtful, just a question in her eyes she could not hold back. "You hid your name because your family would not believe in you, didn't you?" I did not answer. I did not need to. For the first time in my life, my silence did not mean I had nothing to say, did not mean weakness, did not mean surrender. It was a choice, a deliberate silence, powerful enough to make an entire room, once filled with pride and laughter, fall quiet. I let them sit there. One by one, all the eyes that had once skimmed past me like furniture all the polite nods that had never been sincere, all the mocking words they thought were harmless. Now, frozen silent in a celebration they thought belonged only to them, a space they thought was lit only for the already victorious. My mother gently set her chopsticks down. The soft click against porcelain sounded like even she was afraid to disturb the moment. She did not look at me right away. Her eyes lingered on her empty plate. Then she looked up. Her voice trembled not clearly from emotion or embarrassment. Why did you never say anything before I looked at her? Gently, not angry, not bitter, but firm. Because you never asked. Just 5 words. But the entire room froze again. I stood up, not to storm out, not from anger, not to escape. But because this was a simple act, stepping into the light as a part of me that had long lived in the dark was now finally allowed to exist. From my shirt pocket, I took out a neatly folded document. The licensing contract for Novaris I had signed with a major European logistics company just the week before. I placed it softly on the polished wooden table, amid all the eyes now fixed on me. The logo appeared, First Novaris Tech. In the top right corner, the signature line read, clearly Ray Mitchell. I did not need to say anything else, because everything that needed to be said was already there. No one spoke after I laid the contract on the table, not because they had nothing to say, but because everything they had believed, everything they had whispered about for years at family meals, during quiet phone calls and passing glances laced with comparison, had shattered into 100 pieces, falling silently onto the cold tile floor. And no one bent down to pick them up. Because no one knew where to start. The party was not officially over. The music still played softly in the corner. Plates were still full. The chandelier still glowed overhead. But no one laughed anymore. There were no more clinking glasses. No more talk of new cars, smart homes, or rising stocks. The conversations that once kept them buzzing now felt hollow, like empty bottles left behind in a field after a celebration. I stood up, gently, not rushed, not angry, not like someone who had won something. I simply stood, like a person who had waited long enough to finally be allowed to exist in the house once called a home. I adjusted the hem of my coat, brushed away a strand of hair from my forehead. Not to look composed, but to walk away completely, like someone who had walked through mud-braved storms and now could stand without bowing his head or puffing his chest in vengeance. I looked around the room. At my father, the one who shook his head when I spoke of tech dreams, who once called me just a dreamer, not grounded. At my mother, who never meant harm, but who stayed silent through every comparison, who never once asked if I was happy or if I was hurting. At my brother, who once sat in that very chair toasting to applause, who did not hesitate to make a joke at my expense even when I was just an arm's length away. And finally, at the relatives, the ones who once looked at me with pity nodding as they called me the youngest, not sure what he's doing, or the kid who still hasn't grown up, or the one still tinkering with something at home, right? They all sat there like wooden figures, unmoving, not looking at each other, glasses half full, chopsticks resting on cold bowls of rice. A few eyes avoided mine. A few stared unsure whether what they felt was surprise, confusion, or shame. Silence filled the room like thick fog. No color, no scent. But heavy enough to make it hard to breathe. No one spoke because no one wanted to be the first to break the distance now growing between ties they once thought were unshakable. I did not feel hatred. No regret. I did not need an apology. I just felt light. Light like the moment you take off a backpack you had carried for too long without realizing how heavy it was. Light like closing a door, not because someone slammed it, but because you finally chose not to walk through it again. And then I spoke, calmly, soft as breath. but every word dropped into the silence like water falling on a cracked stone, small but deep enough. Thank you for not believing in me. If you had, I might still be trying to earn your approval. My voice was not loud, not bitter, but it cut through the old curtain of judgment that had hung in this house for too long. No one replied, because deep down, they knew I was right, and for the first time they had nothing to say back. I saw my father's shoulders twitch like he wanted to say something, but stopped himself. My mother blinked once and went still. She did not look accusing or tearful, just hesitant like someone who was only now realizing all the things she had missed. My brother looked up, his eyes meeting mine as if truly seeing me for the first time, not as the quiet younger brother in the background, but as someone who had always been there. But I did not look back. I had already looked at them long enough. I had spent too many years waiting for a look of acknowledgement, a genuine question, a small gesture to let me know I was not invisible in the home I grew up in. Now I no longer needed it. I turned and walked through the living room, once the heart of family meals, where I only ever sat to fill the last seat. I passed by the family photo hanging on the wall, the one meant to capture memories, but which always reminded me of what I had avoided. I stood off to the side, half my face hidden in shadow, my eyes looking away, mouth unsmiling posture, distant in a frame where everyone else tried to present a perfect image. I was too young then to understand why I always stood off center. Now I did, because the center was always reserved for pride, and I had never been given the right to step into that space. I did not look back. No one called my name. No footsteps followed. No stay for dinner or even a soft take care out there. But I did not expect that. I did not need a redemption arc or late regrets. What I needed, I had already built for myself. What I lacked, I had already learned to live without. And what I wanted to protect, I was carrying with me. The door opened. Afternoon sunlight hit my face, not harsh, but clear enough to make me squint like the world outside was genuinely inviting me forward. I took a breath. No longer the damp smell of that old refuge. No longer the scent of fish sauce soaked into the walls. No longer the smell of survival under judgment. Only the scent of wind. Cool, clean, with the quiet promise of something beginning, not certain, not flashy, but real. I stepped down the front steps. My shoes touched the ground, light but steady. Each step no longer required a glance backward. Each breath no longer carried the weight of expectations. Every heartbeat felt like a new sentence, beginning the chapter I was finally ready to write. I did not know where the future would take me. I could not say whether I would succeed or fail again, how many times I would fall. But one thing I knew for certain, as sure as the rhythm of my footsteps, I had left my childhood home with a real smile. Not the polite smile to seem okay. Not the social smile when someone asks, "So when are you getting married?" Not the smile of a child trying to win approval just to stay in the family meal, but the smile of a human being who had walked through pain, survived seasons of rejection, grown up in silence, and finally risen beyond the shadow of the past. A small smile, but real. And for the first time, I knew it was mine. Not for anyone, not to please anyone, just for me. If you have ever sat at the corner of a party table, quietly watching others laugh, and no one ever asked you a single question. If you have ever given your all only to receive a shrug, a cold smile, or a doubtful glance from the very people you love most, then this story is for you. Because some pain does not come from wounds, it comes from being ignored, from the smallest joke, from the years spent living for others, and rarely for yourself. If you have made it this far, then maybe you understand that feeling deeply. So leave us a comment. Tell us about a time you were dismissed. Or simply write, "I am still moving forward." So we know you were here, that you felt this, that you walked this road with us all the way to the end. And if you believe someone out there is still struggling between light and darkness, between hope and hopelessness, share this video with them. Maybe a story like this is what they need to stand up again. Quietly, but strong enough. And if you want to keep hearing stories that are real, not polished, not exaggerated, just honest slices of life that might break someone open or help someone heal, hit that subscribe button. We will keep telling them, because everyone deserves to be heard. And sometimes all it takes is one person telling the right story, and we no longer feel so alone.